Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 507. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed and talented comic creator, illustrator, and designer, Gary Hodges. Gary.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you. That's, internationally acclaimed. That's exciting.
See, I know. See, exactly. Yeah. And so our viewers who will be watching this interview can see the joy of your background. You have a Gen X smorgasbord of visual delights behind you.
I do.
Yes.
Yes. I hope you're all very envious. This is what happens when you have an okay job and no kids.
And so our listeners are probably like driving in the car or on the subway thinking, well, what are we looking at? I'm seeing like some G.I. Joe things. I see like an Akira thing. It's like and tons of like graphic novels sitting there. And
tons of graphic novels, and I've got let's see here. I've got some dinosaur toys and figures, which I kind of use, that's sort of work related, at least my comic work. I've got the G.I. Joe boxed set. I've got the Akira box set. I've got a plush, let's see, I'm trying to do this in reverse. A plush zombie that's supposed to look like me down there. I've got a Robotech figure sitting on top of Akira. I've got all sorts of little
what's that? What's the ball cap there? What's that hat?
That's my college, NAU, where I went to school. So Northern Arizona University. Yeah, it just actually ended up there. It's not part of the whole.
It's not part of the display.
It's not part of the museum. It's just where I set it down. So.
Yeah, before we started the interview, we were just kind of like showing off our different Gen X toys that were sitting. I got a few on my desk and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah. But it's really exciting. So Gary, I guess I just want to kind of start things off by having, our listeners kind of get to know you a little bit. So quick origin story. You've been spending 8 years making comics. Is that true?
Yeah. Let me see. 8 years. Is that correct? Yeah. 8 years. I started kind of late. It was finally, I had an idea that just sort of bit me, and I've been doing it ever since. But 8 years. The first book in my series, DvsM, which abbreviation for Dinosaurs versus Marsbots. It's like a sci-fi horror comic. It came out in 2018.
Wow. So you said, was it Marsbots?
Marsbots, yes. Okay. So, robots from Mars, obviously. That's as everyone knows. Right. Yeah, it was originally a very kind of, you can tell from the name, kind of a goofy Mars Attacks B-movie sort of concept. And it started as prints, and almost like how Mars Attacks started as collectible, like trading cards with just little random scenes of Martian violence. Dinosaurs versus Marsbots was very similar. I was just doing prints of different dinosaurs and aliens fighting, and I was going to cons and I was selling these prints. I had a coloring book where it was basically the prints just uncolored with some lore in there. People could buy it. I would give you a box of crayons if you bought it. And, I did that. And it was going well. And the first few years I was doing that, I would always have someone come up to me at a con and say, like, I want the story. I want the whole story. You're going to do a comic. And for years, I was like, no. Like, it's entirely too much work. Not interested. And plus I was looking at it, it's like, this is goofy. Like, I don't know what the story would be. It's like, it's King Kong punching Godzilla in the mouth. Like, there's no story. It's just, that's the story. But from people asking me about it, I do like to write and I love to storytell, and it just kind of got me thinking, like, well, if I did do a comic, what would that be? How would you do a comic if you were going to do this? And I started to get ideas. And then once you're doing that, it's over. Like you kind of, I just got the itch. I was like, okay, I got to try this. I got to try this thing. And I only committed. I was like, I'm going to do one, see how that goes. And I found it a super gratifying experience artistically. And it was, it's not, despite, my international acclaim, like, it does fine. It does well enough to feel like this isn't just a total passion project, or completely like my own thing.
It kind of clicked for you when you made the comparison of like, it's like a Ken Burns documentary on War of the Worlds.
Yes. Yeah. That was my entry in, because I felt like other creators could absolutely do a Mars Attacks sort of thing with the premise I set out, and it would be great. I just felt like that wasn't going to keep me in. I needed a different way in. And yeah, I thought, what if it's like a Ken Burns account of War of the Worlds? Something like that. What if each issue is one particular person's account, firsthand account of this strange top secret sci-fi thing that took place? And that, once I had that thought, it all kind of came together. I was like, oh, then you could do a story about a man in black. That could be one issue. And you could do a story about a scientist. That's one issue. You could do a story about a soldier. There's one. And like the one I'm working on right now, it's like, how about a story about an abductee, like someone who the aliens abducted and what happened. And, once I had that, I was like, now that I can get excited about, because it makes it a little more dramatic and a little more emotional and a little more, I just felt like there was more meat on the bones, and I could do something with it. I could do a limited series, and I could tell like a whole story that when you got them all together, you'd feel like you had something. And then after I'd already started working on it, I read World War Z, which, if you've only ever seen the movie, like I would say, like definitely check out the book, and especially the audiobook's fantastic. But that was like a proof of concept for me, because it was almost the same thing. It was, let's say there was an alien or a zombie apocalypse, and humanity survived it. And now it's like this Ken Burns, like going around and collecting all these accounts of the zombie apocalypse. So you had like, the prime minister of some country, you had a scientist, you had a doctor, you had a soldier. And once I saw that and I really loved that book, I was like, okay, so you can do this. Like it can work. And that just made me feel like, all right, I'm on the right track. I'm gonna see this through with that approach.
You kind of mentioned like the abductee kind of aspect of things. So this is kind of fits a sci-fi. It's like sci-fi, but it also has a horror aspect to it as well.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So what would you say makes like the documentary style storytelling such a good fit for the horror then?
I've always felt, well, first of all, I mean, my background, I in college, I thought I wanted to be an anthropologist, so I studied anthropology. I've always found something really powerful and interesting about the firsthand account, like, someone's individual experience of something. Like, I just find that sort of riveting. And so I thought, well, that's a fun framing. If I can come up with everyone where it's like someone is basically directly or indirectly sharing their story. Like, I think that's just always captivating to me. And I have to assume probably other people too. And then when it comes to the sci-fi elements and the horror stuff, I think it makes that stuff hit harder, and it makes it seem less Mars Attacks, less like sort of just for spectacle and fun, and more for the experiential part of it. Like if you're relating to this person on a human level, it just makes it a little more vivid, a little more tactile. When, I've always had the kind of the creative philosophy with this series that if I tell a really good human story and you buy these characters as real human beings that you're sort of interested in or moved by or intrigued by, or, you have a reaction to, if I can get you to accept all that, when an alien or a dinosaur or something comes into frame, that's going to make it hit completely different. It's going to feel much more everything, more real, more scary, more shocking, more, like all the things. I thought that was just a, a, a way to hack into your suspension of disbelief. Like if I can get you on board with the, and this is, well established, like, Star Trek is about people. Like, that's how you sell Klingons and aliens and Strange New Worlds, is like you get them interested in the people. Something like It is like you get them to buy into the kids.
Right.
And then, like, okay, now that you're in this in a real emotional way, in a real way, now we can take you on a strange fairy tale journey.
So what's the basic shape of this war then, without spoilers?
It starts in the mid-70s. To call it a war, I mean, I describe it as a war, but it really just feels like incursions and attacks by these aliens. Okay. And for plot reasons that, you'd have to read to find out, and I'm still sort of explaining as the series goes on, humans recreate dinosaurs as a way to thwart this. And it's like a kind of a convoluted sci-fi reason, but that will pay off. But it's something that it evolves, it escalates. It's a little bit of a story about unintended consequences. And then it peaks at some point, and then there's an abrupt hitting the brakes, which we'll, exploring later in the timeline. So there's some intrigue about what is going on and why, and like the chart of this like quasi-historical dinosaur Martian war, like what happened. But it's really about following the human experience of going through this strange event. And that's why I think of like the Ken Burns thing a lot, where it's like, if you watch Ken Burns, the Revolutionary War, is it about the Revolutionary War? Or, for example, Ken Burns' The Civil War. Is it about the Civil War? Yes, absolutely. Is it also really kind of about these individuals' experience of the Civil War? Like the letters they're writing their wives, and like how it felt, like what it was like on the battlefield? Like it's more about that. And in that, it's more of a human story than a war story. And I think I'm kind of trying to do the same thing with mine.
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. And thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. You have it set, like you say, in like 75, 79, 97. Mm-hmm. What does that timeline let you do?
Well, mostly it lets me kind of chart the evolution of this like multi-year conflict. So you can see like how it starts, how it ends, and all like the little the ebbs and flows of it. It allows me to do that. It also, just from purely a storytelling perspective, it allows me to do the fun stuff of like, look at these wide ties in the 70s. Look at this cool, look at these cars. Like it becomes a period piece, some of them, where you're like seeing like, oh, look at like the rotary phone. And then, then you follow it up with one. And like the latest one I did is 2001, where you get that kind of switching around of like, you're seeing people wearing plaid with rotary phones and big hair, and then suddenly you're in 2001, which doesn't look wildly different from today. And you get to have these little different, I really feel when I'm done, if people can read the series and feel like they had a really rich experience of lots of different kinds of people from lots of different walks of life, lots of different demographics, but also lots of different eras, like, I think that will be a satisfying thing where you really were kind of on a journey.
How much of this did you have to do as you mentioned, it started off as just images.
Yeah.
And then did you decide to, like, as you said, like make the story? Or did you then kind of go in and start doing the world building aspect first before you actually started doing character development?
I think, let's see, the sequence of events, I think initially there was almost no world. It was just like, what's a fun image? So like, I'm going to do a drawing of a Styracosaur goring a alien robot, okay, and that's the whole thing. And then it's like, okay, well, if I was going to do a story, like, what's going on? Why are there aliens? Why are there dinosaurs? And you start coming up with the kind of the lore of it, the world building, like you said.
Right.
But then when you're actually going to like, okay, now I'm going to do a comic. I mean, you can't make a comic out of the appendix of the Silmarillion or whatever, like you have to come up like, who are the people? Like, what are they doing? What do they want? And that gets you the final length of it. So I think the order of it, like I had basic, like, okay, I need to come up with some premise that justifies this sort of sci-fi concept.
Right.
And then roughly I had to outline, like, this is probably what, like, the general chart of the lore of it. And now it's like, all right, what are the stories I want to tell? What kind of human character is best suited to tell that kind of story? Mm-hmm. What kind of situations can I put that character in to show off character qualities that are going to bring out these themes? Then you're building like that. So and then sometimes it's just arbitrarily at the very end, you're saying like, all right, so when? Is that a 79 thing? Or like, now sometimes it's obvious, like I have a scientist who's involved in the making of the dinosaurs, so that has to be early. So I know that's not going to be a 90s story. That's going to be like toward the beginning. So you kind of ballpark it. But sometimes, like this latest one I did, the soldier story, that could be anywhere. Like if there's a war or a little conflict, you can have a soldier story told 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever. I ended up choosing, it was like the kind of soldier story I want to tell. It just made sense to do it later. And you pick a year. In this case, I was like, for some reason, it just felt right to me to have it sort of in the shadow of 9/11. Like that just felt appropriate. So I'll do 2001, and we'll just set it there. And so usually that's all that's going into the when, is like what makes sense. But it's most important to get the characters right and the plot, like figuring out again, what theme do I want to explore and what's the story that will help me do that.
How did you keep your readers oriented when the POV resets every installment then?
I try to, it's funny, each time there's an element of like clearing the table and going from scratch, so I try to write them all so they're completely standalone. So when people come to my table at a con and they're like, well, which one should I start with? And it's like, what does your heart tell you? Like, I don't, like, I mean, what I'll pitch them all the stories and they can pick the one that's speaking to them, that sounds exciting to them. I mean, I can tell you like, this is the order I wrote them, or I can say like, this is, whatever. But like, if you say like, well, I kind of like the idea of this like innocent bystander who just gets, arrested after they see something they weren't supposed to see, well, start with that one. The benefit of that is you can read them in any order and you get a fat comic. Like some of the comics are like 60 pages because it's a completely self-contained story. Like you get a full character arc in each book. The downside, though I don't think of it this way because I find it really fun, is every book I need to reestablish a new character. You're meeting a new character for the first time. So and you have to start with basics. You have to start, what do they look like and how do they act and how am I introducing them and how am I like easing the reader into this story. You'd never get the benefit really of like, who Eddard Stark is, or like, who Darth Vader is. I don't need to re-explain this, like, and like, let's just go. Like every time it's like a brand new character that's like, all right, so now you're going to meet this person. But I actually really love that part. I really love each time coming up with like, what kind of person is in this one? Because the fun of the series, I think, in writing it, and I hope for people reading it, is each time you're going to meet a completely different person who's at a completely different vantage point in this whole bigger story. And they have their own experience and their own dreams and hopes and their own way about them. Can be and it can be anybody, but I want it where at the end of this, each one is absolutely different. I would feel like I failed if someone read one of my books and said, oh, this Sam character is sort of like Jenny. Like, I don't, I want them all. It's like, no, they're all completely different. And what's fun is when I meet readers, like they refer to them by like the POV character. They don't refer to them by the year. They don't refer to them by like the subtitle or anything. It's like, oh, I love the Ruben one, or I love the Jenny one, something like that, which that makes me feel like I did it right, where they think of the story as about that person. They never come to me and say like, oh, that's the one with the, Deinonychus or the big robot, which that would be cool too. And believe me, there's plenty of like sci-fi and action and all that. Like, I know some of the stuff I'm saying, it all sounds very, maybe a little heady or something, but you get all the like horror and blood and ray guns and all that. But when they think of it, when they have to summarize, like, which one did you like best? They usually say like, oh, I like the one about, Dr. Wagner. Like, that's how they think of it. And it's like, that's what I'm hoping for.
Okay. Now, the horror part to it, I'm really kind of curious about this as someone that, as a creator of this. What scares you more as a creator then? Is it the unknown or the things people do when they're scared?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, to me personally, the way people react. Like, I think that's a lot of what I'm sort of exploring in this. It's like how people react to when pressure is applied, and I think that's where it gets scary and unpredictable. Because life happens, the universe will just happen to you, and you won't have a choice in when or how. But how you react to it, that's where things, I think, get, to me, complicated and messy and scary. And, not to go off into a weird direction, but look at the world right now. Right. It's like, it's how people are choosing to react to things and what they think is like, this is what I'm going to do because of what just happened. And that's where it gets like, oh, this is now getting even worse. So I think like in terms of storytelling, what's interesting is to kind of do an examination of a character and come up with scenarios that reveal them, in ways that maybe they didn't even understand themselves about themselves. Like, I think that's I think the human experience. Like, I think you would behave a certain way in a certain situation, but you don't know, and you might be surprised. And so then life gets tough, life gets hard, life gets whatever, and it you learn things about a person that you wouldn't have ever known otherwise. I think that's interesting to me dramatically, but that's also where there's a lot of horror potential, people seeing their fears realized, people scared of losing something that's important to them, and like, what will they do in that situation? Stuff like that.
What's your rule then for when you show the monster versus when you keep it off panel?
That's also a great question. First of all, I like a lot of build-up. The Jaws model is a good one. Like, I like to really, like, let's take our time and really spend the time on the human characters, like present the threat, like put it out there as a thing, as an abstraction, but like, let's spend time with the characters and like, we'll kind of ease into it. But once it does happen, I'm a big believer in, this gets a little bit into my day job. So I create visual aids for use in criminal trials, and in doing that, so that could be diagrams of crime scenes, it could be anatomical drawings, it could be like showing where injuries were, but the gist of it often is taking something that we think is too intense to show a jury and making a sort of benign version of it to communicate information. So, for example, like this is where the person, these are all the stab wounds. We don't want to show you autopsy photos. So I'm going to do a drawing of the body showing where, you know, all the stab wounds were. Like, and the point being, like, if I show you the photos, the concern is it's going to blow your circuits because, you know, you're just going to be like, I've never seen anything like that before. And it's shocking and it's jarring. And some people would say, like, well, you should be shocked. You know, you should be shocked. This is a crime that's happened. On the other hand, you're not thinking anymore. Like, you're not being analytical. Now, well, how this comes to the comic is, it is my belief, from having seen both sides of this, the sort of audience-friendly version and the real version, that reality can't even compare to any crazy movie or comic or book you've ever read. Like, there's something so shocking about the starkness of reality that the stylization of presentation in whatever media you're talking about only kind of diminishes it. So when I'm trying to draw an alien or a dinosaur or violence happening or something, I'm usually trying to draw it, as crazy as it might sound, exactly how it would look. Like, this is like, so I'm trying, like, what would an alien look like? What would a dinosaur, like a real dinosaur, not a Jurassic Park dinosaur, what would it look like? What if someone got hit by a ray gun or mauled or something? Like, what would that look like? You know, and because I have this inherent belief that that is far more powerful than if I was just approaching this like, what would look cool in a comic book way? You know, I like, and another example of where I feel like, you know, I managed is, I've had lots of people tell me, and from the different books, different people, different books, say, there's something about your violence that's really unsettling. And I think like that's mission accomplished. I don't want it to be, I would hate it if anyone ever looked at some of this stuff and was like, that's awesome. You know, like, I want that on a t-shirt or something, you know, like I think violence should be disturbing. I think you should react to it as if you actually saw it. And if you actually saw it, you wouldn't say like, that's cool. You'd be like, oh, like, you know, that would be, I want that reaction. And as you can maybe tell from me talking about it, the horror element isn't so much like, oh my God, it's an alien, or oh my God, it's an angry dinosaur. The horror elements in my books are usually like, look what they did. You know, look what they did to this guy. Look what they did to this woman. You know, like, I mean, that's usually the like, oh, you know, like, and I think I would rather get the horror reaction not from the threat of something, but from an empathetic place, where you're looking at this character that you care about, or just a human character in general that you feel like, it's like, I don't want to see anything bad happen to that person, and something does. And like, I think that's where, to me, where horror lies, is like kind of helplessly watching. You know, so usually I'm trying to, that's where the place I would ideally like to land, is something where you feel like you actually had a bad experience in a way. Now, I feel like the story should be enjoyable and it should be satisfying, and it should be like, oh, that was exciting at the right parts, or interesting at the right parts, or scary. But I think when it comes to the horrific elements, I want you to kind of feel uncomfortable with it. I don't want you to be entertained so much with the horror elements. I want you to be affected, which I feel like are a little different.
So what would you say then, like, what's one lore detail you're proud of because it just felt believable?
I like, there's one in particular that's been called out, and I was particularly proud of it. And to me, it feels so like, so true to life. There's in DvsM 1979, about the scientist. She has, the scientist, the lead character in it, has sort of a harrowing encounter with some aliens, which she survives, but she's knocked unconscious. And in her sort of disorientation, she's trying to get up off the ground and she slips and she falls and clips her teeth on the counter on the way down and like shatters her teeth, you know, like, and it's just a thing where it's a very everyday sort of thing. But I think what works about it is it's totally plausible. It feels very everyday. It's very uncomfortable to think about because you can imagine, like, it's hard to imagine getting hit by a ray gun. You can imagine falling and clipping your mouth on something. Like that's something that's relatable, you know, and it hits differently. And I like that in that book, you see people get hit by ray guns and things, and it's gross and spectacular and all those things. But I think more people who read that book, they train on the fact like, oh, when she falls and hits her mouth on the side of on the counter, you know, like the edge of the desk, it just sounds so awful. And it's, I think that's why I put it in there, is to give you something where you're like, you know, like, ugh, that hurts. Like, that's terrible. That to me is an example of, and I'm not saying the way I do it is better or worse, it's just the way I do things. Like, if there's like a signature, it's like, that is something that's very Gary Hodges, where it's like, that's an example of, here's a way of inserting some reality into this heightened sci-fi premise that grounds it and makes it feel like something you wouldn't see in, you know, a Marvel or a DC book. Like you wouldn't see someone slipping and hitting themselves. It's just, you know, but it's, again, relatable.
So if someone's brand new to DvsM,
yes,
where should they start and what should they expect then?
Well, like I said, I feel like you can read them in any order, and I have summaries on my my shop so you can see what each one is about. So if one sounds especially interesting to you, I would say just start there. Personally, like if there's a canon order, I like release order, which is, you know, and you can find that different places, but it's basically, it goes 75, which is the one, it starts with 1975, the one about the Man in Black. That's the first, it's not only the earliest one in the continuity, it's the first one I did. And it's the first one I would, if I was reading this in the, what I would consider the canon order, I would say you would start with 75. But again, you know, if you're like, well, I'd rather hear about whatever, then I would say try that one. You know, they really are meant to stand alone. I think you get more out the more you read, because then you start to see all these little connections. And characters in some might pop up in little ways in others, and you know, you get more of a rich experience from it. But
so Gary, then if people want to learn more about you and your work, where is the best place they could go to?
The best two places would probably be my Instagram. The handle is right here. They at Dinosaurs versus Marsbots, at Dinosaurs vs Marsbots. I'm also on YouTube. It's Gary Hodges DvsM. You'll know you found me. My profile has, it's a little cartoony tyrannosaur eating up a gray alien. So like it's going to be, but I have videos on there where I talk about, there we go, there it is. I talk about the process of making the comics. I talk about the comics themselves. It's just all things about, like, some are very, I wouldn't say instructional, but very like, this is how I do it. This is how I thumbnail a page, or what, you know, whatever, or, you know, this is how I sit. Like, here's me sitting and writing. Sometimes it's more general, just talking about creative topics. There should be a little bit of anything you would want there. Some are for the super fans. There's like character analysis videos. So it'll be a deep dive on like this particular character and who they are and where they came from. And there's a little of everything.
Right. Cool. Perfect. Well, listen, Gary, you have to come back on when you get another installment out. This is good stuff.
I'd love to. This was a lot of fun.